so many of the names that turn up here, familiar names, but the Dulles brothers, John Forster Dulles and Allen Dulles, who, wow, were they ever involved in some interesting activities? Tell us about them.
Well, first off, both of them should have been hung at Nuremberg for treason. Both of them functioned as, before the outbreak of the war, they functioned as attorneys covering up the Nazi involvement in the corporations. Try to hide it, the ownership from the U.S. government. Prescott Bush employed them to hide the Nazi involvement in the Union Bank in Hamburg, America, but it was to no avail, and that was because Roosevelt actually had a spy inside of Harriman and Brown that told him what was going on, and that's why they jumped and seized the companies that was doing the most damage before the war, well, during the war, and then they seized the rest of them after the war. But Allen was, his appointment as in the OSS was a setup. Roosevelt knew he harbored the German file and Nazi feelings, and he was setting up people and putting them in the positions where they would most likely reveal their true nature, and so he was appointed as an OSS, and when he was working in New York, right below him, Stevenson, the British, the Canadian super spy that was modeled after seeing John Bond movies, he had an office right below Allen Dulles' office, and knew whenever Dulles was going to the bathroom or anything else. And Dulles was tipped off, and there for a while, when he first got there to Bern in Switzerland, he was tipped off, he started using probably Vatican couriers to get his messages out. After that, he started, they got more, he started using the diplomatic regular channels, and they was back on him. One of the things that they figured that Allen had done was right before the Battle of the Bulge, the Nazis, all radio broadcasts amongst the troops had ceased. And they figured that Dulles had tipped off the Germans that their radio transmissions were being monitored and their code had been broken. And that led to the Battle of the Bulge. It was the only time during the war that the Nazis blacked out the radio. And his motive for doing that was he was stalling for time so he could get more of the Nazi gold and assets out to South America.
Yeah. You know, with
again, he had a big hand in removing the assets from Germany.
But Roosevelt was actively spying on these guys and trying to set them up and to somehow limit their activities. We have a break coming up.
Yeah, we got to go to a commercial. Yeah. We'll be right back with our guest, Glen Yeadon. Stay right there.
Okay, boys, let her ripple. My underwear froze to the clothesline. And my baby, she loved me all the time.
Yeehaw!
And a telephone, I just lost the time. And my underwear froze to the clothesline.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the 128th episode of PsiOp Radio.
Yes, and we're talking with Glen Yeadon, author of Nazi Hydra in America, A Suppressed History of a Century. And I was just about to ask, you were describing how Roosevelt was spying on these guys, like Allen Dulles, setting them up, watching them. Well, how did they still manage to get away with it, that is, not be hung at Nuremberg?
Well, what happened was the nobody knew about this other than the Canadians or the English spy, Stevenson, and Roosevelt. Truman never knew about it. Roosevelt's idea was he knew the evidence wouldn't be admissible here in court, but his idea was after the war he was going to leak the information to the press and let the people and Congress take care of it. You could imagine what kind of an uproar there would be. The servicemen returning, finding out the Standard Oil supplied the Nazis, and ITT built the fuses for the bombs that dropped on them. So that was his idea, but unfortunately Roosevelt died before the war was over. And when Stevenson closed down his shop here, he apparently took all the records with him. There is that he did load up a bunch of records and took them to Canada. So where they are and whatever happened to them, I wasn't able to find out.
Now, weren't some of the other players like Prescott Bush actually indicted for treason?
No.
Okay.
The Prescott was never indicted. Roosevelt didn't even announce that the Union Bank in Hamburg, America had been seized. It was rather kept pretty hush, because he was under the opinion that that it would be demoralizing for the U.S. troops if they heard that Wall Street crowd was supporting the Nazis. So they kept it pretty tight. Not told this on it, but the only notification for Union Bank was a note on the door.
I see.
That was his motivation for that.
I see. So after the war, they have this Nuremberg trial, and you describe in your book how there was an intent originally to have two trials, one for the Nazi officers and high officials, and then another party, that is a necktie party actually, another trial for the industrialists, the people like Henry Ford and Fritz Thyssen and so forth, both in the U.S. and in Germany. But that never happened, except I believe Krupp was tried. But none of these others really, to any extent, was justice ever served. What was the full story there?
Basically, corporate America wanted to kill the industrialist trial any way that they possibly could, because the more Germans that they put on trial, the more chances and the risk that they run of being exposed themselves. So they tried to shut it down. They had their proxies in Nuremberg. I detail one judge there in the book where he was, the quality of the judges just wasn't there, and they was taking their biases. The judges, a lot of them with them, and their bias was that you could run a business any way you wanted. That was part of the problem. The other part was the outbreak of the Korean War. That pretty much shut down everything there, because basically Germany was telling us, you want support for the Korean War, you're going to stop the trials, you're going to get us out, and you're going to free the prisoners that you got. Most of the industrialists that were tried and put in prison, they knew that they was only going to be there for a short time, and I don't think any of them served more than 6 months before they got pardoned. Again, that was the pardons came from largely from Lucius Clay and then John McCoy.
Glenn, what were some of the other industrial corporations that were supporting the Nazis during the war?
Well, ITT did. I alluded to that. They built the fuses for the bombs and artillery shells. They also made some of the walkie-talkies. RCA was involved, particularly in a radio link from Argentina to Japan for them. Ford, General Motors, Standard. Also, William Rhodes Davis and I think he called his oil company Eurotanker. Incidentally, Davis was poisoned, and they figured that these spies, the Canadians, had got onto him, and he was doing so much damage that they decided to take things in their own hands and eliminate him quietly, so he was poisoned.
And there was some, let's see, was it Alcoa and IG Farben and the IBM?
IBM, yeah.
Oh, IBM was there, yes. Alcoa, I don't think operated any plants there. GE did. But your chemical companies were all tied up in cartel agreements with IG Farben. Some of the cartel agreements hindered the war effort. There was Telgo glue for the PT boats, and plexiglass was part of it. Also magnesium for flares and tracer bullets. That was owned by, it was a subsidy of Alcoa that was in a cartel agreement with IG Farben. What was the other one I was thinking of?
When
Tetrazine from Dow Chemical. That was added to small arms rounds for a better round. That was protected by patents that was held by the cartel. So there for a while, the British and American troops were using inferior cartridges because of the patents. Another patent that was held up the war was a patent on diesel engines. The injector, that Caterpillar wanted it, but they couldn't produce it at first until they got eventually nationalized or seized a patent. And that was one patent that was Alan or John Foster Dulles had helped hide.
When did these industrialists or the Nazi sympathizers start coming up with the plan to, I guess, survive the outcome of the war, no matter what?
Well, I think where it originally started, from what you see, what I was able to see, is shortly after LM Stalingrad. When the war started turning, they started looking for ways of covering up their involvement. One of the ways was they did it was to remove any strongly anti-fascist person from the Roosevelt administration and replace him with their own men. They also had a massive amount of proposed peace talks that they tried to negotiate. They all had the same objective, and that was to leave the fascists in power, just take Hitler out. And one of them was pointing Himmler in place of Hitler. Another one had Göring in place of Hitler. So there was a rash of peace proposals. The removal of the fascists in the Roosevelt administration. I think that was the most damning of all, was to remove some of the people from the Roosevelt administration. Because that's when you could really start seeing the Roosevelt administration changed from the New Deal to suddenly something that was quite conservative in the end, actually.